Hey everyone, and welcome again to the Watchlist Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Rohrbach. Today I'm joined by special guest, head of Darkfire Productions on YouTube, Jacob Rohrbach. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. So you're kind of like at the epicenter of this whole coronavirus thing too. So that's good to hear that you're doing good amidst all that.
Yeah, I'm kind of wedged between the two big cities that are kind of infected right now.
Is it how crazy is it out there?
It's very desolate out here. It's kind of empty. I've never seen something like this before.
Yeah, no, we're very much the same. I have a couple. Well, I have a friend or two that live out in Washington State, and they're like, "Oh man, yeah, no, everything's deserted. Everyone's scared to leave the house." But I feel like it hasn't really hit. Well, I mean, it's obviously hit the East Coast pretty hard, but I don't think that everyone out here really fully understands the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, from everyone I've heard who lives in Portland right now, they're describing the streets as looking like I Am Legend. It's kind of weird to think about.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But I mean, I'm glad that you're doing okay.
Yep,
So I guess, yeah, for anyone who's unfamiliar with your channel, just I guess give us a brief rundown of who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm Jacob Rohrbach, and I run a small YouTube channel called Darkfire Productions, in which we produce short films and have been for like the past 10 years. We're best known for something called the Creepypasta episodes, which is a 3-season series where we've been adapting creepypastas to short films.
So you said, how long have you been doing video stuff?
Actually, it's been 11 years. Wow. We just hit our 11th anniversary like last week.
That's impressive. So is it always just kind of been like, is it more oriented in like passion projects, or is it kind of branched out into like more freelancing and less fun projects, I should say? Like,
well, it started out just making kind of fun home videos that branched into a series. And now I freelance and I do all of this other stuff for other YouTubers. It's really enjoyable, honestly. I haven't found a dull day yet.
Yeah, no, I always see you doing crazy stuff, no matter what it is. I mean, the Creepypastas episodes is how I found out about you. You had adapted Candle Cove, and that was something that I had done a spin on, and I was really impressed by I mean, like, coming from someone who has extremely limited resources, I was kind of impressed by your production value on that episode. So that's how I kind of found out about you, and I watched, I think, a very good majority of them since then, and it's a very impressive series overall.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm pretty impressed at how far it's evolved over the years. We used to have only one camera and like a neon light, and now we have a full like film setup.
Yeah, it is kind of always crazy to see how something grows and evolves over time. It's like, it's weird to think like, man, like I personally don't have a project that I've kind of been as invested in as long as you have with that, but I can imagine that it's very crazy to think, man, like this is where we started and now here we are 3 seasons in.
Yeah, 3 seasons in and now a feature film. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So do you have like a like looking, because I know you had said that season 3 was kind of going to be the end of things, and you were going to move on to other projects, not necessarily in the horror vein. But do you have, like, looking back on that series, any few particular episodes that you look back fondly on?
Yeah, my favorite 2 episodes I've made were The Doll with the Lifelike Eyes, where it was an episode I made with all my best friends. We just had like the perfect time filming it. And then Psychosis is the one I'm most proud of. It's an early season 1 episode, but I think that's probably the tightest script I've written for the series.
Yeah, Psychosis that's one of the very first creepypastas I had ever read. And that kind of like got the ball rolling with me, where I kind of wanted to start adapting them, but I don't know why I never took a swing at that one. But that is one that I would really like to do. I find that a lot of times, and I know you've said as much to me with different scripts, that sometimes you'll get from people who like freelance write for the series. They'll come up with all these crazy ideas, and sometimes it's just not feasible to shoot at all. But it is really fun to kind of even just as like a side project to just like try and figure out, well, how would this work on in video form.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a thought process. I usually let my writers like have free reign with the projects and let them write whatever they want, and then I have to cut down the script to make it filmable with my budget.
what was do you have one, it's okay if you don't want to get into it or name names, but is there one that was like really, really out there and you had to scale it back like a whole lot? Or if you kind of, if it's too far out there, you kind of go, maybe this isn't the right person to be working with?
Yeah, actually, the season 2 finale, The Disappearance of Ashley, that one was a whole different script when I first had it written. I didn't originally write that one. I had someone else write it, but the script was just so like out there. It required so many special effects that I just sat down and said, "Hey, buddy, I can't do this." Like there was a scene where like fissures would open up in the middle of the town, and it's like I don't know how to do this.
Well, I must say from that particular episode, I think that turned out very well in the way that it was scaled back. It was still very effective, I think.
Oh yeah, I'm very proud of how it turned out. The special effects, I could have like used a little bit more tuning up now that I look back on it, but for what I could do back then, I thought it was pretty decent.
Yeah, it was very, very impressive. Again, coming from someone else whose resources are kind of limited, I one of the things that I really admire about your work is how you're able to turn out something of fairly decent quality every single time, regardless of how limited your resources might be.
Oh yeah, I'm just very stubborn when it comes to these things.
And that's good. That you got to have that this needs to be done my way, and I will see this through to the end. That's, I think, a very important aspect for someone who wants to do any type of video production.
Oh yeah, I'm a big advocate for creative control. I feel like you need to have that when you're creating something, or else the passion's just gone.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess a few more questions about the Creepypasta episodes. Is there any because like we had said, you're gonna cut it off at the end of season 3, but obviously the world of Creepypasta is so huge and it's almost an endless well to draw on. But are there any particular stories that you're not going to be adapting that you really wish you had gotten the chance to adapt? Whether that be from like just the fact of like your budget was too limited, or like the script was too insane, or like whatever the reason might be.
There was actually a good chunk of season 3 that got canceled that I was looking forward to doing, but the budget got too long, abstractions wore me out, and everything else. But I was actually going to adapt the statue, the SCP story.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, it was going to be a full short film. It was going to be like some camping kind of slasher film. It was a really good script, but it just didn't work out in the end.
Gotcha.
I even made like a little clay model that I was going to use for special effects. I look back on that one, I'm just kind of miss that opportunity.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a very interesting story to try and adapt. I'd always really wanted to do. It's not necessarily a creepypasta, but there's this one short story that I really, really, really would like to take a stab at. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The Harlan Ellison short story. I really wish that I had the ability to tackle that, but I feel like that's just such an involved project that would take like so many more resources outside of what I have. But yeah, no, I think there's always people have those stories of like projects that or like what's the guy, Icarus? It's just like you fly too close to the sun, your ambition is too great. But I guess backtracking a little bit, so how did you get your start in video production?
Well, I started back in 2008 with my friend Marcus. He invited me to join this film production class that our public access station was hosting. And there they would teach us how to use cameras, how to do editing, and all that basic stuff. And after the first 2 classes, I realized I had a real love for doing this, so I kind of kept doing it. I started a YouTube channel with him, and we just formed Dark Fire Productions together to create that thing.
And then how long after that did the Creepypasta episodes come out? Was it kind of a while of like spitballing what you might want to do, or was it kind of instantaneous?
Definitely a lot of spitballing. The first 5 years were just me, Marcus, just kind of making some stupid stuff, just kind of playing around, seeing what happens. Then Marcus went off and did his own thing. He moved to Seattle. He's pursuing his own dreams, and I decided I was going to start trying to make series. I was seeing like what kind of stuff I was making. I was making basically what would be pilots these days of just short films. I had like a parody of survival stuff. I made music videos. And then 2013, I think, hit, and then I discovered creepypastas, and I discovered Grocery List, that kind of popular story. And I decided to take a shot at making a film of that, and that thing blew up, so I made Eyeless Jack, which also blew up, and then from there I just decided to make a series out of it.
So then, yeah, obviously, like, you had your start with, like, the doing all these, like, sort of miscellaneous projects, creepypasta episodes happened, and then recently you've been kind of trying more dramatic feature length or at least longer form short films. So how has that switch been like for you?
It's been different. Like, it's a total genre shift and a total different look at production in general. Like, Abstractions was a dramatic horror production, which I had to focus a lot on lighting, character work, and all that to make a hour-long feature film. And this next project, Hoodie, is just a complete drama. It's interesting to work with these characters, see the actors kind of build on these characters and ask questions instead of just playing kind of tropey characters from horror movies.
Right. And is that just the burnout of creepypasta episodes of, like, let me try something completely different, or do you think that maybe one day you'll go back to horror?
It's definitely a burnout for now. After making horror for 5 years, I started noticing I fell into a formula of how to make productions. I was using the same stuff over and over again that it just kind of got boring to watch and edit and produce that I physically started getting tired doing. So I decided to take another shot at different projects, do some more artsy stuff, do more dramatic stuff, kind of awaken myself in a sense.
No, that totally makes sense. Yeah, no, I can see how working on something for that long could get kind of tiring. So then, Hoodie is what you're working on now, right?
Yes, it's currently in post-production and editing.
Well, that was good that you finished it before all this kind of shut everything down.
Definitely, yeah.
What's your plan? Like, because I know with Abstractions, you got it crowdfunded, you made it, and then you kind of tried to take it on a festival circuit. Are you planning on doing the same thing with Hoodie?
Yes, actually, my friend Drake Douglas just helped me produce it and get it out into the film market in LA once LA is out of lockdown.
Oh wow, that's impressive. It's
crazy to think that we're actually now into film festivals.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a weird kind of surreal experience to, if it's one where they have, like, screenings. It is kind of strange to see something you've made, like, up in front of a whole bunch of people.
For sure. We had a local screening at the old movie theater in Longview for Abstractions, and seeing an audience there live, not on YouTube, is just weird.
Yeah, it definitely changes from, like, just the view count to, like, actual physical reactions. It's,
and hearing people, like, gasp and hearing people laugh.
Right, yeah. So, do you have any upcoming projects after Hoodie, or are you just kind of like, I mean, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with the state of the world for a while, but are you just kind of, like, feeling things out, or do you have, like, a backlog of stories you'd like to tell?
I'm kind of toying around with a few scripts right now, just kind of making stuff as I go, just bringing some old projects back to life, writing some new scripts, just seeing what I feel at the time.
Gotcha. So I guess moving a little bit past that, getting into, because this is a movie-based podcast, I'm going to ask you some specific movie questions. The one thing that I find, the one question that I always like to ask is that people who want to be in a creative field are kind of, like, inherently driven to want to be in that field and work harder and all that, but whenever I listen to interviews with, like, directors or cinematographers or editors, there's always kind of they always talk about this one moment that got them interested in wanting to pursue what they want to pursue, like whether that be like I knew someone who was involved. More often than not, I find that they're like, oh no, I saw this one movie or there was this one show that really gave me that creative spark and made me believe I can do it. So do you have that sort of moment or that movie or that show that kind of made you think, I want to do that? That's what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, there's a specific moment that stands out in my childhood when I first saw Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't really need to explain that movie much.
Right. So that's...
But yeah.
Yeah.
I remember watching that on a family trip and just seeing the creative uses of effects, the strange story it told, and listening to the commentary from Wes Craven, and just feeling very inspired by this desire to create that movie that I wanted to do the same thing someday.
And it definitely led you into the horror genre in a nice way.
Yeah, it actually inspired my first short film. It was a very poor parody of Freddy vs. Jason that me and my brother made back in my backyard. And that was a real kicker to make short films. Me and my brother had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, those early projects are always the ones that like they're the most cringy to like think about, but there is kind of like a fondness to looking, a weird kind of fondness looking back on stuff like that.
Definitely.
The very first, well, I mean, I made a YouTube channel back in, I want to say 2010, with a couple friends of mine, and our whole thing was we were trying to rip off, not like directly rip off, we were huge fans of the Angry Video Game Nerd and the Nostalgia Critic, so like it was all like really bad video game and movie reviews. And then they kind of fell out of it a little bit, but then I continued on with video production. And the very first thing that I tried to make after that was a really, really bad feature-length Slenderman film. And
Ooh,
thankfully, all that footage has been lost. But it's, I definitely, but there is, like, even though, like, thinking about it, it's like, just, I cringe so hard, it's terrible. Like, there is kind of, like, this nostalgic feel of like, oh man, I'm running around the backyard with my friends and a camera, and we're just making something, like we're doing something no one else is doing. So,
oh yeah, that's definitely how Creepypasta's been too. It's just a lot of my friends hanging out on camera, and we're just doing things, making projects. Then our creative soul's free, you know.
Yeah. So, and then I guess one other question that I always like to ask in the vein of talking about movies and all that, that I feel like it wouldn't be a movie podcast if I didn't ask this question, is what is your favorite movie? Or favorite movies, like your top 5?
Oh man, I have a list somewhere of my top 5s.
Oh boy.
Because I have a weird obsession with making lists. So,
I feel like I have to have a list because a lot of people ask me, "Oh man, what are your favorite movies?" I feel like it's too broad. I would just start going on and on forever. So I feel like I need to have a concise like top 5 or a top 10.
All right, so here's at least my top 3. My absolute favorite movie is Across the Universe, the Beatles musical.
Yeah, I know that one.
It's such a movie. It's like a childhood movie to me. Like, I've watched that since it came out in 2008, ironically enough. And the visuals of that are just beautiful. All that. That's for a later date.
Right. Yeah. No. I definitely. I remember seeing the first maybe 45 minutes of it, and I liked what I saw, but I don't remember if I ever finished it. I'll have to go back and check it out.
And my second is La La Land, the movie that we'll be talking about today.
Right.
I'll say that. And then it's hard to go with the third one because like it's always that one is always changing depending on my mood. But right now I'd have to say probably Amelie. That's another childhood movie I watched when I was a kid.
Oh, which one is it? Sorry, you cut out.
Amelie.
I don't know if I'm familiar with that one.
It's a French film, very popular, very stylized, very unique in a way. It's by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I have no idea how to pronounce his last name. But it's a very quirky, very stylized movie, and I love the storytelling in it a lot. It's very inspiring.
What's that one about?
A girl named Amelie. She has a lot of little quirks about her. She's painfully shy, and she discovers that she likes to help other people. And so she kind of goes around France, learning about people's backstories and trying to making them happy. It's just very cute.
I can imagine. So when you say quirky, is it kind of like what kind of quirk are we talking about here? Are we talking about like Wes Anderson quirk, or are we talking about just like French cinema as a whole quirk?
Kind of, I'd say Wes Anderson quirk. They all have their little personalities that make them stand out against each other. Very specific things that they like to do.
Yeah, I how do you, so Amelie, that's how you pronounce it?
Yes, Amelie.
I'll have to add that to my watch list, no pun intended. Let me pull that up really quick. I might even have that on there. Amelie. Oh, wait, I know what this is. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen that poster
Yeah.
before. Oh, and it is?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
it's already on my watch list. Great, okay. So I'll have to make a point to getting around to that one.
Yeah, it's a very popular film. I've seen there a lot of people discuss it. Back in high school when we took French class, my French teacher made us all watch it, and I just fell in love with it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I've seen that poster before. So yeah, no, I'll definitely have that pinned going forward. I'll check if I check that out. I'll let you know what I think.
Yeah, definitely. If you like Wes Anderson, you're gonna probably enjoy this film.
All right. So then, moving forward, well, actually, one thing I should say is full disclosure. We talking about the Creepypasta episodes. If anyone's interested, I've written 2 episodes of the series so far. We've also collaborated outside of that series. So if anyone's interested in going back and checking anything out, I'll link all of our collaborations down in the description, and also if you want to just check out Jacob's work in general, everything will be linked down there. You definitely should. A lot of really fascinating work. The one thing I might go back and edit this like chronologically so that it's earlier, but I think you had mentioned working with other YouTubers on different projects. So I guess let's talk, because I know you work with Rainbot a lot on writing her stuff. Is there any other collaborations that you've had that have been really fun or really impressive? And Rob Dyke too, now that I think about it. That one really kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, I wrote a few scripts for Rain and Rob Dyke. There's a few of them I don't know if I'm legally allowed to talk about because I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm working with my friend Drake Daglish. He has a few shorts out right now. Like, I've worked on his short film, The Kite. Won a few awards for that one for cinematography and composed the music for.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. His next film, Another Cabin Massacre, I did all the cinematography for. It's currently in the short film market. It's looking pretty promising. It's been nominated for a few awards. None of them I'm involved with.
Well, that is still really impressive either way. So are you kind of, just sort of talking video production in general, are you kind of, like, because I know that you, with Creepypasta episodes and, like, your short films and all that, you're kind of like do it all yourself, whether that be out of necessity or something that you just enjoy doing. Do you find that you kind of enjoy the whole process, or are there, like, different elements that you find yourself enjoying depending on what day it is?
I pretty much enjoy all of it. I love just having a creative outlet. Like, shooting is the most fun for me because I love cinematography. It's one of my favorite things. Writing is one of my passions. I love to write anything, anytime. Though editing, I could probably do without.
I can see that.
That's a long process that I just cannot sit still long enough for.
No, I get you. I'm kind of I understand that viewpoint, but I'm kind of the opposite in a weird way. Like the actual making of it is the part that I find myself stressing about the most in a weird way, because I've always I have this weird like thing of like kind of like even if it's like my friends working on it with me, I'm kind of like, oh man, let's try and get this done as quick as possible. I don't want to waste their time. Like, not that I want to rush through everything, but I kind of I find myself most comfortable in the editing phase because it's where everything like actually starts to come. Like, you get to see it. Like, it's one thing to like write down a script and then like get some people together and record like little bits and pieces of it at a time, but then when you actually start assembling it, I find that like that's kind of the most exciting part for me, at least, is it's like it goes from this from a concept to like a living, breathing thing. It's very, very rewarding, but I mean, different strokes for different folks. But
I definitely get what you mean, though. I get that same kind of rush when I'm filming something. Seeing something I've written acted out in front of a camera on set is a thrill to me.
Has there been, like, in any of your projects, is there, like, one... I mean, like, I can imagine that you get it pretty consistently on almost every project, but has there ever been, like, one moment that you've shot or one moment that you've done in any of your projects where it was just so gratifying to see it come to life and it just got you so excited?
I'd have to say that would be Abstractions, my first original, like, really original project. I remember the first day we were shooting that... we walked into my living room, which was a set that I have just completely destroyed. I built a fake wall for it, threw papers and all this just garbage around, I remember just standing there for like a good minute, just taking it all in, just realizing that a project that I'm making is coming to life. Something that I put all my originality into is real now.
I totally understand that. Yeah, it is like, whether that be in the editing phase or in the actual shooting phase, it is always kind of a rush to, like I said, just take something from like just this abstract, like, again, no pun intended, but this abstract concept, and then like just kind of birth it into reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess moving on to the next topic, we're on to the film discussion portion of the show. So anyone who's tuning in for the first time, unfamiliar with how this works, I used to have a YouTube show where I would recommend like 10 movies every month to people, just stuff that I had seen lately that I thought was interesting. But obviously, when you show footage on YouTube, you get copyright striked all the time, and I also just hated the sound of my own voice reading off of a really badly written script, so I decided it wasn't worth it, and I ended the series, but I still wanted to do film discussion, so that's why we have this podcast. So every episode, I recommend the guest a movie, the guest recommends me a movie, and we discuss. So I guess going off of the vein of creepypasta and horror-based production, one movie that I've kind of been interested in talking about with other people for a while now, and I thought, why not talk about it with someone else who really appreciates a good horror story, the film adaptation of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by André Øvredal. So, what did you think of that movie?
Yeah, this movie's been on my radar for a while. Like, I've been just needing an excuse to see it because I was morbidly curious. Like, I grew up with the books when I was a kid, so I was wondering how they would adapt it. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised by it. It's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, I guess just for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, and don't worry, we won't spoil it yet. We will be having spoilers, but we won't be getting into those just quite yet. The plot involves a group of kids who live in this small town, I guess canonically not too far away from where I live in Pennsylvania, because,
Really?
yeah, no, because there's a scene where it's kind of a little touchy. The asylum that they mention at one point, Penhurst Asylum, is a real...
Yeah.
That's a real asylum in Pennsylvania that actual bad things happened at, so that is kind of a little controversial, but yeah, no, it is. So it's about these kids who live in this like small Pennsylvania town, or it's around Halloween, and they find a book of scary stories written by a ghost of a girl who was killed 100 years ago or something like that, and they, I guess, disturb her final resting place, and the stories start to come to life, and they're all modeled after different stories that were popular in the book, which I thought was an interesting way of going about it, because I had always kind of wanted to do that, like one of my like I had mentioned earlier, one of my vain like script ideas that I really wanted to try and do at some point was, I had it in my head that I really wanted to do a kind of like an anthology film of scary stories to tell in the dark, where like, because I feel like that, like the fact that it is kind of like it's all like they have nothing to do with each other would make the most sense. How I had it, a bunch
of like campfire stories, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So how I had it in my head was what I would have wanted to do was have like hour and a half, like to 2 hours maybe maximum, of like the stories with the most substance fleshed out a little bit, but have them all like animated shorts, not all necessarily in the style of the drawings, but like each short may be done in a different animation style that like lends itself to, I guess, whatever story is being told. But I think like, so that was one reason why I was kind of apprehensive about seeing it. But my younger brother, who was a really big fan of the books, he went out and saw it and was like, oh no, it's not as bad as you think, it's actually pretty decent. So I watched it, and like you, I was very pleasantly surprised. So in regards to, I guess, the stories they told, were you kind of you said you were pleasantly surprised with its presentation, but I guess elaborate more on that.
Well, the way I thought the stories would be like told is, as you said, you want to do anthology. I thought it was going to be like an anthology film where they would just show unrelated clips that are linked together somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But making it centered around a book and about a bunch of scary images, I thought was a very smart way of handling it.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a lot of tie-ins back to the book, whether direct or indirect. Like that melody that they keep on singing is like one of those scary songs that was in one of the books. There's like small references to other stories that maybe weren't overtly shown. Like there's like instances where they combine kind of like, I think they took the Who Has My Toe monster and another monster from just a random other story and kind of combined them into one, just because the visual was so striking. But
yeah, I remember thinking that, like, when I watched it, like seeing the Big Toe story changed up a little bit, which was very effective.
Yeah.
In the execution.
That's one of the ones that I'm a little bit iffy on. like
really?
I'm glad that I think that they did a good job bringing like the tone of the stories to life and a lot of the visuals kind of creating them in how they would look in a 3D space. But in terms of picking the stories, I think that they could have done maybe a little bit better. Like, I mean, the Big Toe, like, I mean, yeah, that's iconic, but that was one that just never, and I guess it just boils down to subjectivity, but that one just was always kind of like silly to me. I don't know.
Yeah. I remember my mother telling me about the Big Toe story, like, cause that's an old like folk tale that my grandparents would tell my mom. My mom told me. I remember just thinking that was just a silly story. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
A lot of the scary stories are just kind of folk tales that parents would tell their kids to scare them. And
right, yeah. No, but I definitely, because, like, yeah, it's like you said, they had, and the whole reason those books were written was, like, the author just wanted to preserve, like, folklore of, like, different areas. But, like, I had never really heard a case of any of, like, those stories being told, like, as folklore. I mean, obviously, like, the ones that, like the high beams thing where, like, you have the guy driving behind the girl and he flashes the lights every time the killer comes up, or the killer's calling from inside the house. Like, those ones are obviously like the stereotypical, like, every town has a story like that. But I never knew the Big Toe had like a group of people that still, like, told that regularly.
Yeah, it's very classical. It's a bit more goofy than the movie let on. It's very, very silly. Like, the toe ends up in the garden or something like that. I don't remember it fully. I just remember seeing it in the movie and thinking, like, wow, my mom would probably go nuts for this.
Did you tell her about it afterwards?
Not yet, but I told my brother, who's probably gonna tell her.
Oh boy, that'd be a fun reaction. But yeah, no, that was the only one that really kind of like bothered me that they included it, just because it seemed kind of a little bit weird. But
the weird one for me was the Jangly Man, the Mitai Dotri Walker.
Yeah, because that wasn't. That creature wasn't, like, from the actual stories, but that, like, that little sequence where, like, the head down the chimney was.
Yeah, and then it just kind of took off on its own, just crazy route that just seemed a little out of place in my book.
Yeah. I get that they kind of needed to have, like, some sort of, like, big bad monster for, like, the third act or whatever, but I thought that was handled kind of well, but I do see what you mean, where, like, there wasn't really much like, substance to it. It didn't really have much to do with the story. And like the one thing that I thought was really interesting that about the movie kind of as a whole is that and the one sequence in the movie particularly, I feel like it did a really good job of communicating, like, things that scare younger kids specifically, like, not necessarily, like, I think that horror movies a lot will emphasize, like, one big bad guy or, like, one big external force that you need to overcome, and there's not really a lot of movies that kind of stew in this idea that, like, no, like, this kind of nightmare logic where, like, no matter what you do, you can't overcome the scary things or the force or whatever that's coming after you. And I think the one sequence in the movie that did it very well was the red hallway.
Oh yeah, I love that sequence.
I think the lead up to it was that's why I really wanted to kind of like hash this out with someone else, is because it's very like a love-hate relationship with this movie, because the lead up to that sequence is so stupid. But
definitely.
But the actual sequence itself is like it is like the stuff of nightmares. It's like no matter what you do, you can't get away, and there's no explaining it. It's just like you're stuck in it whether you like it or not, and it's so unsettling.
I thought it was just really weird where the kid just out of nowhere mentioned a weird nightmare he had.
Exactly, yeah. No, I hated that so much.
Yeah, but then the situation happened, and he kept running down the hallways, and all it did was just get closer and closer. That just got my heart going.
Yeah. No, that was I really like that sequence up from like when that the old timey like record player thing is like playing, and the girl's like, run all you want while you still can, like that. From there up until when the friends find his like pen or whatever, like that, it was really good. The Herald sequence too.
The Herald sequence was brutal.
Again, operating very much on like that nightmare logic, where it's like no matter what happens, there's no escape. This like weird kind of feeling of hopelessness. But it was the Herald sequence. I feel like they almost kind of I feel like they almost used their best gag a little bit too early. You know what I mean? Because that was like a very, very visceral scene, and and to like have that be like the first kill, I feel like is very kind of like they wasted not like wasted, but they used their most effective stuff too early, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely thought the kills got a little bit watered down after that, because having a kid stabbed and then keep going with that was pretty genius in the book. Like having there be more than just him dying, that the straws coming out of him, just how painful it was. It got under my skin, but then the movie just doesn't do that after that.
Right. Except for like that the Red Room sequence, which I thought was like if I'm comparing like my favorite bits out of the whole movie, I think that the Red Room and then Harold, I think, is where it's most effective. The big toe is kind of like the weakest part of the movie for me. Like I love the idea of like something is like coming after you slowly and you hear it coming, and like and there's nothing you can do. Like that's a very effective concept for me, but like just something about the fact that it's a toe in a stew is just like it just breaks the immersion. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, definitely there's not a lot of stakes during the toe scene. Like he didn't believe him, toe and stew, then run away. There's nothing much there. There's no sign of danger except for the fact something's going to happen to him.
Right. And then
there's no looming threat.
Exactly, yeah. So then I guess before we get into spoilers, one thing that I kind of talked a little bit about with my brother before I had the idea to have this as an episode on the podcast, but are there any stories that were in the book that you really wish that they had included that they didn't?
Ugh. I was actually pretty satisfied with everything. I remember the big stories that I remember were the Pale Lady and Mitai Jotri Walker, and I was just kind of let down by the Mitai Jotri Walker thing.
Yeah, it's just kind of like that one element, and then that's it.
Yeah, and I read the books too long ago to remember much.
Gotcha.
Any specific details.
I remember that one thing, I forget who said it, but I was talking about the books with somebody, I was listening to someone talk about them on YouTube or something like that. But they said that were it not for the pictures, then nobody would really remember the books at all. I feel
definitely. I remember when I read the books like a few years ago. I bought them at a garage sale and started reading my friend. And we discussed that these stories are kind of stupid, looking at it from like a 20-year-old perspective.
Exactly, yeah. But it's just still like there's still pictures in the first book especially where like I still just cannot look at them. Like it still unnerves me that much. Like I don't know if you're familiar. Like I think it was in the first book. The story was called The Thing, where it's like this like skeleton with like these really tiny like peering eyes. Like
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll actually hear. You know what? Hold on. Because I know if I Google it, it'll be the first thing that comes up. I'll send you a picture so you have a reference. But yeah, it's that one. The witch story from the first one, where like the guy is like driving the nail into the heart of the tree or whatever to get a witch to leave him alone. That one really freaked me out. I think another reason why the Red Room sequence was so effective is because that particular image was the one that freaked me out a lot. But right.
Definitely.
So yeah, here's is it working? Yeah, we'll just pause for a second so you have a reference. There we go. Okay, so yeah, that's the one that freaks me out the most.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
So yeah, like the pictures are kind of what sell the book, and there was a big outrage a few years, kind of getting a little bit off track, but there was a big outrage because they did a reissue of the books a few years ago where it was the same stories, but a different illustrator did the pictures, and it was it was the same guy who did the series of Unfortunate Events pictures. So, and there was there was a huge I forget his name, Brett Helquist, I think. It was still like scary pictures, but I mean like nowhere near as terrifying, and there was a huge outrage for the original illustrations to come back, and I think that like the newer editions of the book have the old illustrations put back in, so I guess that it just speaks to it that there's a huge fan base for these stories. But speaking of the images, I remember one image became a big creepypasta image, going back to that, the one with the half of a skeleton face with like that's, I don't know how to describe it. I'll send you a photo. Oh, okay. I think I might know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it was one of the covers of the book for a while, but that image just here it is. I remember seeing that constantly when I was when I was younger.
Right, yeah, no, I think that's the one that they I think used for either the toe monster and you only see it for a split second, or they used I remember seeing something that like that creature in specific was in the movie at some point, but I don't remember if it was like the ghost of the girl or if it was the toe monster or
I think it might have been a toe monster because I remember something flashing, but I didn't go back to check on it.
Mm-hmm. And fun fact, I also found out, I was doing some reading before we recorded, but the toe monster is played by the same I don't remember the name of the guy, but he's like a famous he's famous specifically for horror movies because he's like a contortionist, and it's like able to do. He was like the same guy who did Mama from that Guillermo del Toro movie.
Oh, he talked about Doug Jones. Or is it a different guy?
No, it's a different guy. It's like a weird, I think like a Ukrainian name or something like that.
Oh, the guy because the guy had with like long fingers or whatever. So I remember that was like a defining feature. Yeah.
He played the toe monster. I think he did a couple. He might have been the jangly man for like the actual practical parts as well. But but that's actually another thing to touch on too. Is like one thing that I was a really big fan of is that a lot of things in the movie were done practically with very few CGI enhancements. Because one thing that I mentioned back in the first episode, and then we touched on it a little bit in the third episode, is that I'm definitely not one of those people that are like, oh, practical is always better than CGI. It's special effects in general are a tool that should enhance your movie, and it doesn't, like, however you do it, as long as it's realistic and it's a well done effect, however you do it is fine. But I think that the state of things today is that there is a very kind of the industry favors CGI way more than practical, and I think that it should be looked at as like more of a, well, what's more appropriate for this job, rather than just saying, okay, we'll just throw it all into a computer later and figure it out then. But I did really appreciate how a lot of the creatures were practical with CGI enhancements rather than putting everything in later. It definitely gives them more of a presence, I find, and like in story and in making a horror movie. If you believe that something is there, it's obviously way more effective than having that doubt, I guess.
Yeah, a good example is like the pale lady from the Red Room sequence. The way she walks, the way she moves has definite weight to it because she is a heavy character.
Right, yeah.
And I remember seeing a behind-the-scenes photo of just the costume, just how like detailed and good it looks.
Mm-hmm.
And like the only CG I think the only CG I think they did is just make her mouth move a little bit.
Yeah, it was like her mouth, I think like some veins or something in her face. Like there was I think they like made her like I don't know how to word, like they made her kind of like wet in a weird way. Like they added like moisture or whatever to like her skin to like make her kind of look, I don't know, like it's just
like she has like living parts.
Right, yeah. And then obviously, I mean, the Jangly Man is like a pretty 50-50, like CGI versus practical. But when he is actually physically there, like it's unnerving. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Harold especially too is also very. I like that they the way that they handled him. Like it just like kind of very robotic, and it doesn't like he never has a facial expression or anything like that. But
I do like that, like the fact they didn't really give him a facial expression. They kept him kind of looking like a scarecrow that just moved. Didn't like have it didn't look angry. It just kind of looked dead.
Yeah, it was definitely a good choice. But the one thing that I kind of you touched on it a little bit, and again we can start to get into spoilers now because I feel like we've talked a lot about the different elements about this movie. I don't want this to be the whole episode, but one thing that you had said was you had found the books and you were reading them with a friend of yours, and you're like, oh man, these are just not scary. And I definitely agree. Like reading them now, if it's just like you or like someone else in your age group, it's like, oh man, this is not scary at all. This is kind of bad. But like I think that one thing that is kind of lost on us now is that when we were younger reading those stories, like they were like, that's just what scared us at that particular time period. Whether I think like they're recommended from like 5th grade to like 7th grade is like the recommended reading level for those books or something like that. But I think that the one thing that was interesting was I thought of it like that's kind of like what, let's say 10 years from now we're looking back on like our like favorite creepypastas that we like to read, or like our favorite horror movies right now. We're probably not going to look at them unless it's a really effective story or a really effective movie. We won't look at it with the same fear or the same I don't know, the same kind of gut reaction that we have to it. I think the fact that like we have all those years of context and perspective now kind of give us like the ability to look back and kind of see what was scary and what wasn't. And I think that one thing that I was interested with, I kind of reflected on after the fact, was when I saw the promotional material for the movie, I was looking at it like this is a movie trying to appeal to me, like cashing in on the nostalgia of my childhood, and it just looks bad. And then when I was watching the movie, I'm like, oh no, this is very clearly made for like kids, like 10 to 13-year-old kids. That like I'm not gonna like, this is just not scary. But then the thing that I thought was, well, that those books were not trying to appeal to adults. Those books were trying to scare kids. And it's just purely, whether it's the pictures or the fact that we really like those stories as kids, they carried into adulthood with us. But that movie is gonna be what those books were to us for kids that are in that age group now, if that makes any sense.
That makes total sense. I get where you're going with that. With the PG-13 horror aspect of it, it did really well for like what it was restricted to, and good enough to probably make kids scared now, but like us as adults probably wouldn't be as too bothered by it.
Right. And I actually kind of appreciate it more because it like I said, there's a lot of movies out there, especially today, that are made because they're meant to be like nostalgic cash grabs on things that appealed to people of our generation or maybe a step or two older than us, trying to bring in people purely off of nostalgia. And I think this movie definitely was trying to do that to an extent, but that wasn't its sole focus. Like,
there's a lot of love put into this film. Like people who are making it definitely wanted to make a good scary stories movie, and it's reflecting really well on the project.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I that's not to say like it's still not for me. Like I can recognize, okay, this is not something that was made with the intent to scare me. This, for someone of my age, this is meant to be like, oh, you remember these stories, right? Like, look at what these nods and these little references we're putting in for you. But it primarily is meant to be like a gateway horror film for people, and like, so kids of that age group today are gonna watch that. And then they might be inclined to go back and find the books, and then they'll be like, oh man, I want more. And then they find out what Creepypasta is, and then they start to get into the more adult horror movies. Like, so I think that it is very, very good, because I'm hard pressed to find, like, when I'm thinking back on it, I'm hard pressed to think of like scary movies meant for kids that are as brutal or as effective as this movie is, or at least how I can imagine it.
The PG-13 horror market is a bit terrible, to be honest.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, they don't really make horror movies appeal to kids. They just make horror movies and tone down the violence just so they can get more money.
Right.
But this one definitely seems like a horror movie made to be a horror movie at that age.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, so like a 13-year-old can go watch this and say, hey, this is actually kind of good. I kind of like being scared like this. Let me find out what else is out there.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they'll fall into like the Nightmare on Elm Streets and Friday the 13th and all that jazz.
Right, and on that level, I really respect it. But at the same time, I definitely do have problems with it. Like we said, like there's moments where the writing is just really, really contrived and really are you familiar with the movie Black Dynamite by Scott Sanders?
Vaguely. I have not seen it. I just know about it.
You definitely should. It's a very we talked about it on the podcast, but it's sort of a movie that parodies blaxploitation movies. But one thing that it does very well is that it parodies kind of like writing tropes in general. And there's one gag that they always do, or not always. There's a gag that happens early on where there's two characters in a flashback, and they're just saying dialogue for the sake of like giving context to the audience, and like to the point where like the exact line is the guy goes, Jimmy, I am 18-year-old Black Dynamite, and you are my 16-year-old kid brother, and you are once again hooked on drugs. So there's a lot of like it's like making fun of dialogue like that, but there's a lot of instances in this movie I find where, like, again, we said the Red Room, where he's like, guys, I had this dream last night that I was in a red room and there's this woman coming after me. Do you think that that's going to happen to me? Like, it's just like, there's a lot of moments like that in the movie where I was like, okay, that's I can appreciate what you're trying to do. And yeah, maybe not everyone would necessarily care about that, but like, come on. So yeah, no, there's just a lot of, moments where I wish the writing was better. Like I said, there's different, like, I wish they had made a bit of a different selection monster wise or story wise, what they decided to incorporate. But other than that, I think it's a pretty decent scary movie for kids.
I agree, honestly. When the horror aspects are there, it's really good. Just when they try to get the plot along, it's not good.
Exactly. I guess last thing I wanted to touch on before we moved on was what did you think about the fact that they kind of sequel baited?
I'm curious where it's gonna go. I'm all for a sequel. I'll probably check it out, just judging by how much I enjoyed the first one. Mm-hmm. But I don't know where they're gonna go with that.
Yeah, I really hope that it's not like a situation where it's like we have to go into the ghost dimension to save my friends. Like, I almost wish that, like, this is probably going to be taken the wrong way at first, but hear me out. I kind of wish that they would do, like, a human centipede thing, where it's like the second movie has nothing to do with the first movie. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's still going with that that idea of, like, there are elements that are connected. That like if let's say this we do get a second movie, I would like it that there is some sort of element. There is like some way that there's like these scary stories from the books that are being told, and maybe like there's creatures coming to life or whatever out of these stories, but not necessarily have it be about the same group of kids. Like, let's just say their story is done, they've ridden off in the sunset, hey, we're gonna go find my friends, and that's the last we hear of them, and then we get like a new group of kids, or like, because like you said, and as it's proven, the stories are from folklore that are all over the world. So
yeah,
I think it would be interesting if we go to like a different time period or a different region and kind of explore the folklore of that area more.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see them go out of the 60s too, which was a strange like spot to land this story in.
Mm-hmm. If I'm honest, I think that was like purely like a Stranger Things type thing, where it's like,
definitely,
let's set it in the past.
I got a lot of Stranger Things vibes out of it.
yeah. But yeah, no, I guess that's all I have to say about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I think it's a very solid horror movie. I watched it on DVD. Let me look up really quick how you can watch this movie if you guys are interested in checking it out. It looks like it's available to rent on Amazon Prime, YouTube, Google Play, and Vudu, all for about $6. I don't know if it's available for free just yet on any other streaming services.
It's not. I just ran to Walmart and got it for like $5.
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, no, so if you're interested in checking it out, definitely watch it. I think it's good for at least one viewing. Even if you're not necessarily into the fact that it's for kids, I think that there are definitely elements to appreciate about it as an adult that I think make it worthwhile. Moving on, the movie that Jacob recommended me, I forget I forget where that reference comes from, but and now for something completely different.
That's Monty Python.
Oh, that's okay. All right, fair enough. Well, now for something completely different. The movie Jacob Rohrbach recommended me was La La Land by Damien Chazelle. You had said that it's your second favorite movie of all time, so tell us, what is La La Land about?
Well, it's about two people, Mia and Sebastian, who are played by Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling, as they are trying to pursue their dreams in L.A., Los Angeles. Mia is an aspiring actress, and Sebastian is a jazz musician who just wants to open his own club. And it kind of just follows their lives as they meet, they fall in love, they eventually get together, and then it continues and shows you what happens after the happily ever after. And it's all done in a musical style, like old Hollywood musicals.
Yeah, that is one thing that I definitely appreciated a lot about the movie, is that it's very old Hollywood, and its presentation, right from the opening frame, the whole presented in CinemaScope is very reminiscent of like 50s Hollywood. There's all of the colors are very like saturated and vibrant. There's a lot of shots.
Color plays a big part in it, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of shots I especially liked where like they're up in the Hollywood Hills and you're looking down at the city and it almost looks like a matte painting behind them, but like not quite. I really liked that that whole aesthetic of the movie. I will admit I'm not a huge fan of musicals. There's just something about it that like the characters spontaneously breaking out into song and dance that kind of takes it out of it for me. But that being said, I feel like this movie did a very good job of incorporating the music into the story.
Mm-hmm.
It was very. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say what I've experienced is this is a love it or hate it movie. I've never seen someone who is just okay with it.
Yeah, no, I definitely really enjoyed it, but it was definitely a. I wouldn't go so far as like I said, there are times where I'm like, okay, that like that weird part of me is like I'm taken out of the moment, but I definitely, as a whole, I think it was a very, very effective movie. Very solid performances from both of them, especially Emma Stone. I feel like there's a lot of great moments with her. One in particular, I don't want to say quite what it is yet, because it'll get into spoilers, but it's towards the end of the movie, when she's backstage and she overhears a conversation. She doesn't say anything, but the look on her face, like, it just, that really got me.
She plays this vulnerable really well on that. You see there's like a layer of insecurity to her character that I really enjoy.
Right, yeah. And it definitely, like, for both of them especially, but I think that you really, really see it on her.
Yeah, it's good. It's contrasted really well with Ryan Gosling's, like, very overconfident personality.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I kind of like, is that they kind of adopt each other's traits a little bit. Like, she becomes much more confident in herself, and he kind of starts to question himself a little bit more. But
yeah,
it was character growth done correctly.
Yeah, the whole movie is just held on these two characters, and they carry the story very well. It's very fun to watch them evolve as people over time.
Yeah,
you start with Emma Stone, like, flipping Ryan Gosling off in the hallway into, like, 30 minutes later when they're just madly in love.
Exactly, yeah. And that was one thing that I thought was really interesting, is because it's like you said, in the first half, it is like a traditional movie where there's like a whole bunch of people, and it's like you kind of look at it like it's almost like it's an ensemble play or whatever, where it's like you have your two main people, and then there's this whole big huge supporting cast. But kind of as things like pick up for the two of them, it just kind of becomes them. Like, just them, the entire like almost the whole rest of the movie, except for like the very end, which I thought was very good. Especially interesting is that, like you said, it's a musical, and again, for like the first act, it's very upbeat, and like there's a song every other scene, and it like really kind of gets you like I don't know the word, like it gets you very like invested in, like, oh man, yeah, no, this is the great music, there's action, there's lots of stuff happening, but that kind of like quiets down.
Right after, like, City of Stars plays, it suddenly just becomes a normal movie. You kind of forget it's a musical after that.
Right, yeah, and the one thing that I kind of, not getting too far into spoilers, is that I feel like it kind of, the moment where, not necessarily like things go south, but like once that like their two characters like really start to develop and they start to like learn things about themselves and each other, that's kind of when the music stops. And I thought that was very interesting, kind of like foreshadowing with like maybe their like the way that they interact towards the end of the movie, like the idea of like the happiness and like the upbeat and like the just general overwhelming positivity kind of being drained a little bit. But I do, like, again, for someone who doesn't particularly enjoy musicals that much, I did enjoy the way that they used the musical numbers to communicate subtle things like that.
Well, the thing I love about it the most is how much of a love letter it is to, like, Hollywood and like old film together. It's like it's a love story, but also a love letter to old cinema.
Exactly.
Like it has so many it harkens back to Casablanca and all the old films that like a lot of people loved back then.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. Like the way that it's presented, especially in the beginning with like a lot of like one takes, like it's a bit more dynamic than old Hollywood, where like they would kind of like set the camera down, face like an open set, and like let everyone kind of like a play basically, let everyone kind of go and like get it all done in like one or two shots. It's like I said, it's a bit more dynamic here, where you have like a lot of camera movement, especially in the first few musical numbers, which were really impressive. I like that it is kind of like that one movie that came out in I want to say like 2010, 2011, The Artist. I forget who did it, but like that silent movie that was like made like kind of meant to look like it was from back in the 20s. It like kind of relished in like those themes and the way that it presented itself. I feel like that this was kind of that, but like with 50s musicals or 50s melodramas, where like everything is kind of over the top and in your face, but it's also very modern. And it just reaffirms Damien Chazelle's obsession with jazz music.
Oh God, yeah. I think every single project he's made is just jazz.
I haven't seen what's the he did a First Man. I think, did he do that, or was it Ad Astra?
It was First Man, yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen that one yet. So does he sneak jazz into there somewhere?
A little bit. There's a small part of Neil Armstrong's character that likes jazz.
Oh man, that's funny. I still haven't seen First Man yet, but I loved Whiplash and I really liked this a lot, so I'll have to check that out.
It's pretty good, but That's just my bias.
What were your thoughts on Whiplash, really quick? I don't want to get too far away from La La Land, but since we're talking about Damien Chazelle.
I adore Whiplash. It's one of my favorite, like, top 50 movies.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Like, another one of my favorite movies, like, top 5 is Black Swan, so I really love, like, obsession stories, and that Whiplash and Black Swan are usually, like, compared to each other because of how they
There was a great
obsession.
I don't remember what YouTuber did it, but if I can find the video, you've probably seen it because it sounds like a lot of what you're describing, but there was a YouTuber who it might have been Every Frame a Painting, but I don't know. It was a channel who does a lot of film analysis, but he was specifically comparing the last 20 minutes of Whiplash to the last 20 minutes of Black Swan and drawing a lot of similarities.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Oh, so you've seen it?
Yeah, it's Lessons from the Screenplay.
Okay. But yeah, no, that's a great video, so if anyone's interested, check that out. I'll link that. But yeah, no, Whiplash is great, and I think Damien Chazelle is again, I haven't seen First Man yet, so I can't really speak too much on it, but I think that he's definitely one of the definitely one of the more fascinating directors to be paying attention to today. He has a very clear voice, and I love the way that he presents his different subject matter.
He definitely has a really, like, I don't know what to he has a very unique style.
Mm-hmm. For sure, yeah. But I guess, yeah, getting back a little bit to La La Land, I guess we can start to spoil it a little bit. So if you haven't seen La La Land yet, I definitely recommend you should check it out. Let's see.
I do.
It looks like it's available on Prime. Yeah, no, I watched it on Prime. I think you can rent it for $4. Also available on YouTube, Vudu, and Google Play for $4. I don't think you can rent it on iTunes, but it looks like it's available for purchase for $20, which that seems a bit much considering how old it is. But yeah, no, definitely check it out on any of those platforms. I think it's definitely worth it. You don't have an excuse not to. So yeah, I guess
almost won Best Picture.
Almost, yeah. That was I didn't see that live, but that was a hilarious shit show to watch later on. It's been ages since I've seen actually. Well, and I guess I was gonna say which one do you think should have won, but considering it's your second favorite movie, I think you have a very clear horse in that race.
I'm a little biased on that one.
Yeah, but so I guess getting into spoilers. So I guess let's talk about, like, because we talked about the fact that it's very much presented in, like, it's the style and the way the story is structured as like it is structured very much in, like, the style of, like, a 50s melodrama where it's like a very set type of story from start to finish, but it does kind of, towards the second half, it kind of plays with that a little bit, like it changes
after the big Hollywood, like, planetarium moment. It starts kind of grounding itself after that.
Yeah, it definitely, it kind of, like, not necessarily, like, flips it. Well, I guess if that would be the right term, flips it on its head, because it is kind of like it plays with the idea of, like, will they, like, because I mean, like, that is kind of inherent, where it's like the two people you didn't think would come together do, and then they're great, and then there's, like, a misunderstanding, or there's something that goes wrong and they split up for a while, but then they come back together and everything's great. But, like, that's just not what happens here, and I thought it was very, very effective in the way that they handled it.
It uses one of my favorite writing styles, which I incorporate into a lot of my works nowadays, is the unsatisfactory ending. So it's kind of just bittersweet. Everything is fine. You're not angry with everything, but you're also just not happy. Exactly,
yeah. And it not only that, but it kind of, like, I would say I would go so far as to not even call it unsatisfactory ending, because, like, had they not pulled on your heartstrings and, like, done that, like, huge long extended flashbacks, like dream sequence, where it's like, here's what your life could have been like, then I think that then it would have been a good unsatisfactory ending. But it goes out of its way to almost be like, you will feel an emotion by the end of this, even if you've been stone-faced throughout.
By the end of it.
Exactly. But I just love it. Like, that last scene especially, like between the two of them, there's no words at all, but just like the way they look at each other and the way that like their body language and like the way he kind of is like fixated on the piano and he looks up at her and they give each other one last glance. It's just like,
oh god, that nod kills me every time.
The nod, oh my god, yeah, it's so powerful. But yeah, it's just so I guess I can't name the song specifically. I think if I had to pick a favorite, I did really much enjoy I think it's just Here's to the Ones Who Dream, the one that she
oh god, the audition, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the one that I remember at least the melody of the most. I did kind of like the beginning, like the way that it is kind of like very stereotypical, where it's like, hey, everything's great, everything's cool, and then you have the one where it's like, I'm kind of fed up, but I'm still kind of happy because I'm out in LA and like all that. And then, but I did really, really much enjoy the Here's to the Ones Who Dream, like not until the point where I remember all of it, but I think that like if you had to sum up the movie in one song, I think that's the perfect piece to do that.
Yeah, that song is like a real, just like, again, to use the comparison, a love letter to like just the creative types and people who want to pursue their dreams like me and Sebastian do in the movie.
Right, yeah. And even like smaller people like you or I trying to pursue our dreams on YouTube.
Exactly.
But yeah, no. So it was just La La Land was very, very, very good movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Such a beautiful film.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Even just purely, I forget who said it, but I think the person was like, if you can turn the sound off of a movie and just purely look at the visuals and still get a sense of the story, then you know that it's done its job well. And I think that you could definitely watch this as like a silent movie and still get the same effect.
That's a great way to put it, honestly. I've never heard that said before, but that is perfect. A perfect descriptor.
And I wish I could remember who said it, because that's one of those sayings I hear tossed around a lot. But yeah, no, it's just like I said, they like the stuff that's like real, but then they go out of their way to make it look like it's painted, just to get like that 50s aesthetic. The way that like all the brights are very like saturated in a very specific way. Nighttime.
The costumes are like very primary colored, so it stands out.
Yeah, like the nighttime is very like, it's not like black with like the neon a little bit. It's like it's like the deep blue and purple, and it's so beautiful.
Everything just looks like it's on a set of some sort, but there's an element of realism to it.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's I could go on and on about it.
Yeah, like even the opening scene looks like it's on a set, but it's done on an actual LA highway that they closed down.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely like I love that a lot of the scenes were kind of like the one shot, like the mimicking of the way things were shot back then. But that sequence in particular really impressed me with like the fact, because you have to imagine you don't even have to imagine, like if one thing goes wrong, then you're starting over, or you have to hide it with like someone moving in front of the lens really quick, and I'm sure that there's instances like that somewhere, but I couldn't pick up on them. But the fact that like, it's like you said, it looks like it's faked, but they actually did shut down the portion of that highway, and it is very very impressive. And and I like to imagine, because the one thing that kind of made me laugh a little bit was like, you can kind of tell where like the extras kind of get cut off, where it's like they're like here's the point where there's not anyone dancing. The one thing that I kind of like to imagine is what the people in the cars behind that dance number were, not necessarily in real life, but in the context of the movie, what those people were thinking was happening when that breaks out. I mean, talk about road rage.
Yeah, everyone's already backed up in LA and already angry, and then everyone's out their car and dancing all of a sudden.
Exactly.
My friends in LA talk about that scene like it's a real life thing.
I can imagine. That's the one thing I always hear about LA, is that the traffic is just terrible. But man, no, that opening sequence is just really impressive, and the movie as a whole is just really really well done, really well put together, and I mean, it's coming from a director that I've already appreciated and very much want to see what he does next. So, yeah, it's definitely it's a great movie, and thank you for the recommendation.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Of course. So,
and thank you for Scary Stories. I was looking for an excuse to finally watch that, and I'm very happy with it.
Definitely, yeah, no, you're welcome. Yeah, I was really looking forward to talking about that one specifically with you, like I said, because the whole, like, as someone who is kind of heavily into horror and like kind of like breaking things down on a level like that and thinking like, well, how would I do it, or like how effective, like taking a genre and breaking it down to a science. I knew that was going to be a good conversation to have. So I guess on that note, we're out of time for this episode. So thank you guys for watching the Watchlist Podcast. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me. Love to have you on again.
Thank you for having me.
Love to have you on again sometime. Talk more interesting movies with you. Maybe some more horror. Maybe some more musicals. I don't know. Maybe I'll finally get around to finishing Across the Universe, and we'll go from there. But
absolutely.
In the meantime, like I said, thank you guys for watching the Watchlist Podcast. If you want to be in on the conversation for next time, tune in. I'm going to be having yet another friend of mine from Kutztown University, Avery Thompson, on. He's a person who we were both into video production. He's kind of gone a little bit in the way of graphic design and comic books and his own artwork and all that. So it'll be fun to talk about that project that he's been working on and other stuff that he's done since graduating. If you want to be in on the film discussion for the next episode, the movies we'll be talking about might be a little bit difficult to find this one, but I recommended him Fantastic Planet, or if you want to go by the French name, La Planète Sauvage, I think is the correct way to say it. I think that you can rent that on Prime for $3 or $4, probably on YouTube for around the same price. And again, sticking with the theme of not having the recommendations have anything to do with one another, he recommended me, I can't even say this with a straight face, the Velocipastor, which is a very strange looking horror comedy, I guess, available for free. I think it's on either Vudu or Tubi. And probably available to rent online most other places. So if you want to be in on the conversation for either of those, check those out before that episode comes out. Again, Jacob, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
And thank you guys for watching the Watchlist Podcast. We'll see you next time.